connecting with others, what does our nervous system really have to say about that? So this is a quote from Resma Menakem. He's well known for My Grandmother's Hands. He's a somatic experiencing person and a therapist, and I've learned a lot from him over the years. I did an interview with him 3 years ago, I think it was. So the body either has a sense of safety or it doesn't. This is so much in alignment with my own experience and those of people that I talk to. So much of our life depends on whether or not we feel safe in our body. If we don't feel safe, we'll do almost anything to establish or recover that sense of safety. And that's almost all of what our practices are about. Am I safe? We orient to the room, we look around us, look for cues of safety. We work with our breath, our bodies, our thoughts in the mind. But this is the basis, the root of that. As we're looking through a trauma lens, and I find this so helpful, and sometimes people will say, oh, you're always relating this back to trauma. And I really think that it's a useful lens to look through, even though there's other lenses that we look through as well. But to look and see what's happening in my nervous system. Am I in a state of fight, flight, freeze? What's happening in terms of my safety? And what we notice over time as we work with this is that we become better regulated. Our neuroception, which is that perception of threat and safety, it's an unconscious perception of that, that becomes sharper and more accurate. A lot of what we're reacting to are things that were dangerous in the past, or something that might still be dangerous, but now we're an adult, we have different resources. What we're trying to do always is to come into this present moment. What is my actual situation right now? And then we know how to get back here too. We might do box breathing, might hold our own hand or give ourselves a butterfly hug. We have all of that. Those ways, those really reliable ways to regulate our nervous system. And as we do, we experience other people as less of a threat and maybe even welcome. And then we become that sets the ground for that friendliness with ourselves and others. So nervous system is always trying to keep us safe. That negativity bias of the nervous system gets us in trouble a certain amount. We notice danger more. And when we do this kind of work of looking at what am I actually reacting to? When I go into that meeting or when I think about going into that meeting, why am I holding my breath? Is there a person in that room that's maybe going to look at me a certain way or say something? And how much does that have to do with my whole life experiences? And that's the unconscious part of it. We're bringing in all of that evidence. So these survival strategies, one thing I wanted to just touch back into on these is that these are also driven unconsciously. So we don't decide we're going to go into a flight response. We don't decide we're going to freeze. These things happen in response to perceived threat. So we're all familiar with fight and flight. We try to get away if we can. If we can't, we're going to defend ourselves somehow. Freezing is something that's a little less obvious. It's a very numb, it almost feels like stillness, except it's not because the awareness isn't there. So we might be holding our breath. We do things that allow us to kind of stay under the radar. And if we're around somebody that's abusive or scornful or something like that of us, especially if we grew up with that, then we might have developed a habit of staying quiet, but also a habit of people pleasing or fawning. We are always trying to stay out of trouble. And that can cause a lot of alarm in our nervous system as well. So these are unconscious as well. So what I wanted to really work with right now is the thoughts in the mind and then the response in our body. So what are the thoughts in our mind? What is the response in our body? Anytime we perceive threat, we harden up against it and our mind tends to go into things that aren't helpful. So let's look at this. We'll pause here for a moment and look at some of the ways that we look at pictures. So if you were to notice what's happening right now in your body, Just notice your whole system. Are you feeling kind of relaxed? Are you getting a bit tense? Are you holding your breath? Have you got smooth breath? What's happening in your system right now? And quite often, when we're feeling like there's a dread about meeting somebody or there's something going on with somebody else, we'll have an image of that person in our mind. We might also have a tone of voice or some kind of audio trigger as well. But let's just work with the pictures first. So, one thing that we can always do is step back and see ourselves in the picture. So, if I was to use an example of dreading a meeting at work with this person who's not respectful, who's a bully, maybe something that's, I'm just dreading that. So, instead of looking at that person's face, broaden your perspective, step back and see, here I am sitting in that meeting room with that person. So, who else is in there? See everybody else in there and notice that there's, water glasses on the table or whatever it is. Notice the whole picture. And that makes it a little bit easier to work with some kind of a thought. It's like when we look at it out of our own eyes, it's like we're there. When we can see ourselves in the picture, it reminds our mind that we're not there. We're looking at an image. And the same with words. If you have words, you can also put those into a frame. So, one of the things that we do with images or with words is tapping. So, if you have something going on that's kind of activating, you just bring a couple of fingers to your forehead. And as you're thinking about that thought, then take your attention into the sound and the sensation of the tapping. So maybe you have an image of yourself in that meeting, and you could see that your shoulders are up around your ears, and you could relax your shoulders and then just tap on your forehead for a minute, and that breaks the trance again. So, what we're doing is we're trying to stay present in this moment where there's nothing going on. We're not actually in a meeting, we're not actually in the past or the future. We're just looking at something that might be bringing up some anxiety for us. So, the frame part is in your mind, you can do this, but you can also do it. I mean, it's still a visualization in your mind. I like to do this with my eyes open and just look on the other side of the room, find kind of a blank spot on the wall or on the ceiling, and imagine that that image or those words are in a frame. So you can see that it's several feet across the room, however big your room is. But you can see that there's space between you and the image. You can see it's in a frame. So we frame images. It's a video clip. You might want to kind of imagine a screen or a laptop screen or something over there with it playing on that. But just notice that there's a collection of shapes and colors. That's what thoughts are, images are. They're arranged in a certain way. They have a certain look. They mean something to us. If it's words, there's letters and shapes. There's spaces between the words. So we can look at it quite like a scientist, kind of clinically. What is it that's in that frame? And then we notice as well, and we're going to come to this in a minute, what is the response in our body to what's in the frame? So when we're looking at something that's a bit alarming, we're going to probably hold our breath. We're going to tighten up our body. We might have sensations. So we're going to come back to that in a minute. But in the meantime, look at the frame, look at the image over there, and then take your eyes around the outside space. So let your eyes go around that a couple of times in one direction and then a couple of times in the other direction. So we have an image, a frame around it, and now we're working in the space on the outside of the frame. And then when you're finished going around it a couple times in each direction, then look back at the image in the frame, whether that's words or a picture, and notice what your response is to it now. And you could do that again if you wanted, or you could do a little bit more tapping on your forehead. So usually what happens is there's a little bit less engagement with the image when we've done that, when we've done the tapping or put it into a frame, and especially when we trace the outside space. So that's one thing that we can do with the words and images, and then that makes it a little bit easier for us to then go into the body and notice what's going on. So whatever image you're working with or whatever situation you're working with, notice that again. And if you wanted to, anytime you want, you could take your eyes around the outside of that and then really tune into your body. So, what's going on in your body as you're looking at that? And really common to have some kind of energy in our mouth, might be a constriction or heaviness in the chest. We might be holding our breath for sure. Sometimes people feel like they can't really breathe. There's something in the way of their breath. So notice what's happening in your body and notice it kind of with images first. So sometimes people have an image of a sensation. So it might be, I have an image of a metal bar in my heart or something, whatever it might be. Some people don't. So if you don't, that's fine. But if you do, notice it. Does it have a color or a shape? Notice the location of it too. So what does it feel like? How big is it? What are the edges of it? That's another thing that we can look at. So if you have a tight fist in your stomach, for instance, is it radiating out into the whole of your chest and down into your arms and legs? Is it really specific? It's this little, intense bit of energy right in your navel center. Where does it end? So then notice that. Sometimes when we have a strong sensation, we'll put our attention on the space on the outside of the sensation. Notice where the sensation is, and then notice where it's not. And then notice other attributes of the sensation as well. Is it hot or cold? Is it moving? Is it still? That image of the tornado, that's something that a lot of people, or some people anyway, have is that feeling of whirling energy inside their body. So there's a bit more of a threat, it feels like, if there's that kind of movement in an energy. If it's a pain, is it dull? Is it sharp? Is that hot? Let's take a moment to sit with the energy. Locate and describe. So we're feeling the energy and we still have a lot of awareness in the present moment. We're looking at it, we're describing it. Is this a familiar energy to you? And now let's just kind of take a step back and notice all of that space around the energy. So kind of stop the locate and describe, just really look into where is it not and get yourself kind of settled in that. And then another way to work with that is, does it feel accessible? Like, could you put your attention in the middle of the sensation? So if the sensation's in your stomach, notice if you could really bring your attention right into the middle of it as though you're looking out at the world from the middle of that energy. And sometimes there's a yes, sometimes there's a no. If you can, see if you could go into the middle of that just for a moment. What's it like from the inside? And then notice the space around it as well. See if it's okay with you that that energy is there. And so that's the next part of working with energy. What's it here for? So we know from experimenting that when we have an energy that's here, it's usually in response to something. So we might have really persistent contraction in our body. I used to have a really tight neck and shoulders, my upper back. But then there was also other energy that comes in. So it might be familiar. You might have that a lot of the time, even, but it's not 100% of the time. This kind of energy sensations that have to do with feelings. So if you were in the middle of that sensation, or if you're on the outside, just kind of attuning to it, ask yourself some of these questions. What does it mean? Why is this sensation here? And very specifically, we could look at, is it here to hurt me? So, especially painful sensations, especially then also if they're associated with thoughts. So, we've had a image, a memory, something we're looking ahead to doing. We have a specific set of images we've been working with that you can always come back to the tapping or the tracing. And then we have this sensation in the body that's associated with that memory, with that perception of threat. And just to notice, does it feel like it's here to hurt you? If it does, there might be some images around that, like how do you know that? But really, after a moment, most people come back to this, no, it's not actually here to hurt me. It is here to warn me or protect me, is usually what the answers are. So let's sit with that for a little bit. What does this sensation mean? Is it related to an age? What's the situation? Why is it here? And if it's here to warn us about something or protect us, what is the danger from the sensation's point of view? So if you're in the middle of that sensation, or if you're on the outside of it looking in, what is your sense of that? So this is an intuitive exploration or inquiry. What is it that it wants you to know? And stay very attuned with this present moment through your body and your breath. Notice your feet on the floor, your breathing. And notice the space around the energy. This is an exploration that we can take some time with. These aren't fast kind of explorations usually, although sometimes an answer will come right in. Well, if you go to that meeting, you're going to be look like a fool, or that person's going to do something. So sometimes there's a pretty fast answer, but often it's really helpful just to kind of sit with it. What does it mean? Dr. Stephen Porges, with the polyvagal system, talks about being safe enough to rest in another's arms. So as we're doing this work, part of it is that we are becoming known to ourselves. And part of it is the recognition that we do want to have connection. Sometimes it's with an animal, sometimes it's with other people. We need that. All of us need that. And how are we going to get that? So, part of the answer is we regulate our own nervous system. And part of it is that we really look into what is my perception of safety or danger with people generally, with specific people. When people are not regulated, meaning they're anxious or depressed or they're in a fight response, they might be mean or something like that, they're hard to be around. And when we have a history of not being very, finely attuned, emotionally attuned with parents or caregivers or other people, then we're going to be more sensitized to that. It's going to feel like more of a threat when someone else is dysregulated, which really brings me back to the saying that my meditation teacher, Swami Veda, would often say the greatest gift you can give the world is a peaceful mind. And a lot of that has to do with this specific, what is my nervous system saying about the situation that I'm either in or I'm thinking about that was in the past or that I'm thinking ahead to? What is my nervous system response?